This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey beautiful people, I'm Lucy, and today we are talking all about wildlife photography. I'm gonna give you my top 5 tips for taking and editing wildlife photos, especially if you're just trying it out or you're interested in it and you wanna get going. These are the tips that are gonna set you up for success. Now, I am by no means a wildlife photographer. This is not my type of photography, but I find when you kind of are lacking inspiration or you just wanna get inspired again, it's a great idea to just try a totally different genre of photography or something totally different artistically. And for me, that's what always sort of gets me excited again and makes me feel like in awe of photography. So my favorite bird photographer is Paul Wishart. And in December, I got his photo book. I love photo books, by the way. And I think anyone who's interested in photography, you should get some and get inspired. And it just has so many great photos that I've been inspired by lately. And so when I found out he was doing a workshop, I was like, sign me up, take my money, I'm in, I'm doing it. So I went to the workshop and it was so much fun, and I literally took some of my most favorite photos of the last couple months for sure. And it was all to do with this bird photography. Actually, they call birds of prey raptors, so it's actually called raptor photography, which is way more badass, super cool sounding. So yeah, let's get into the details of raptor photography. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what lens do you need to do wildlife photography? And this is a pretty broad question because of course you can make any lens work, make it work if you have it. But if you are really excited about wildlife photography, if you already know you love it or you really want to get into it, you're going to want a more powerful zoom lens, something like a 200 to 300 millimeter, so that you can really get those awesome close-up shots while you're farther away from the subject. Now, if you don't have a lens like that, don't worry. I don't have a lens like that either. It's just not a lens that I usually need to use. So if I ever need it, I just go and rent it, but I don't own one personally. So for this workshop with Paul, I just used my main lens, which is the 24 to 70. And I was super worried about using this lens because I was like, I don't think this is a far enough focal length. I'm not gonna get good photos. But I was super stoked on the photos that I got. The focal length worked. I just made it work for me. Now in this case, the birds were pretty close, and we had a lot of opportunity to get shots. So that's partially why it worked so well. But I'm also just really comfortable with that lens, so I know how to make it work for me. So I know this was like a huge blanket thing, but if you can get a farther focal length, get it. If you don't have one, just try out with what you have and you'll still be able to get great photos. So once you know what lens you're gonna use, the next important thing is to figure out your camera settings. And this is something that is very, very important and vital for wildlife photography. And the main thing is that you wanna have your shutter speed very, very high, talking about 2500 or 3200 shutter speed. And that is because animals, they're just unpredictable, there's lots happening, and you wanna make sure that you get them completely sharp. So when you have your shutter speed that high, you're gonna have to have your aperture more open to let in a lot of light, or you're gonna have to boost up your ISO. So those other two things you'll have to play with to figure out where you want them to be, but start with the shutter speed being really fast. And I'll just show you here sort of the difference. Now, this is a shot with the shutter speed at 3200. So you can see everything in those feathers are completely in focus. It is very sharp. It is a captured moment. Now, if we go over to this photo, which is another one that I really, really love, this one, the shutter speed is at 2500. So still super fast, but because of how fast these birds move and also because of the wind, you can see right around here where we have that motion blur showing. Now, in this photo, I don't mind it too much because the birds are moving. So a bit of motion blur looks kind of cool, kind of adds to the vibe, but you want to make sure that that was intentional. And for me in this photo, I really wanted it to be that super crisp look. Like I said, the 2500 still worked really, really well, but if we compare it to the 3200 shutter speed, you can just see how sharp that is. And then when you go up and you make your shutter speed really fast, what that does is that lets less light into your camera. I have a video all about exposure and shutter speed, so click the link up there if you want to check that out, and it'll give you a great intro on how different settings affect your camera. The other thing I would say is definitely err on the side of underexposing your photos instead of overexposing them, especially when you're working with a sky. So in this photo, here's the before, and the bird is actually quite dark, but the sky was just like a diffused cloudy day, but there was actually quite a lot of light coming out of it. So if I had have overexposed that sky, I couldn't have brought that color back into the photo. So it's definitely more important to underexpose a bit. You have more ability to bring light into the photo in post, and then you could also do some more interesting things with the sky. If you blow out your sky in the photo, it's very, very difficult to bring color and depth and interest back into a blown out sky. So for these photos, keep your shutter speed very fast, 25 to 3200, and err on the side of underexposing instead of overexposing. My third tip is to pay attention to the subject and the background. One of the things with wildlife photography is that you can get so focused in on the animal that you kind of forget about everything else going on in the photo, and I definitely did that with my first photos during the workshop. I just wanted to get that really good photo of the bird. I was thinking, oh, I want its wings, I just want it, and I want it to look really cool. And I totally forgot about what was happening in the background of the photos. So if we go over here, you can see, here's one of the hawks, and while this is super cool, it has its wings going, it looks awesome, it's sort of muddy. Like, you can't really get a good differentiator between the bird and the background. So you kind of have to look at the photo for a minute to really see what's going on or to really appreciate the bird. Now, I don't want someone to have to be like squinting at a photo to get what's going on in it. So once I kind of realized that, that's when I changed my perspective. And for me, I actually ended up shooting more of like the background into the sky instead of into the trees. Although I did get some tree shots that I really like, I felt it was a more sure thing when I did the background to the sky, because it kind of looks more like this, where now we are really making the focus the bird, the background becomes more minimalist, and it just gives it a much cleaner look. So here's another example of a photo like that just shows a lot more of the bird, and it's very interesting, and your eye is not distracted with all this stuff that's going on in the background of the photo. But sometimes you don't want to completely separate your subject or the bird from the context of where it lives. They live in the forest, so we want to show some of it. So what is a great thing you can do is, like in this photo here, keep your aperture wide open, and what that's going to do is you're going to get more bokeh, you're going to get that background to kind of be blurred out, which is going to keep the focus on your subject, which is the bird. So for me, I find anything between, as low as 1.8 to 3.5 aperture to really give you that blurred out background look, and then you focus right on your cute little birdie. So that's another way. So either you focus into a clear background or use some bokeh or just some framing on how you can separate it from the background. Now, speaking of framing, that brings me to my fourth tip, which is composition. I had a lot of difficulty with the composition when I was doing this bird photography, and this is probably what challenged me the most and made me the most excited about doing this, because it really was a challenge. But what I found in terms of doing composition with animals and with birds is that you kind of are gonna go for, do I want everything in this shot, or am I going for a detail? Because when you get stuck in the middle zone, the photos just don't look that great. So here's an example of that. So this one here, really cool with the wings and everything, but I didn't get the entirety of the bird in, and it's really hard because they move really, really fast. So I didn't get the whole bird in, so it just doesn't work as a photo. This one I would say also doesn't work because, again, I wasn't paying attention to the background, so it kind of looks muddy. There's a person back there. It just overall doesn't work, but the framing really didn't help me at all. The composition didn't help in this photo. So ones like this, where actually the entire wingspan is in the photo, that works really well. That looks really cool because I have the whole bird in the photo. but sometimes it's just really hard to get the whole animal in the shot. It just doesn't always happen because they're not paid models. They're not doing what you tell them to do all the time. But here's another example here. So here, again, I was focusing on trying to get the bird. The background didn't really help. And while I got all of him in, I just didn't like how the composition was looking, how it was looking with the background and all of that. So when you find, okay, I'm not gonna get this full bird shot that I want, so can I do something else to get it here? So here's one that I took, and again, I just was having trouble getting the entirety of the bird in the photo. And so this is like a weird in-between shot where you don't have everything, but you're not close enough to be making it interesting. You can take a photo like this and don't throw it away. See what you can do with it in post and say, can I crop this photo now to make it a more interesting composition? So what I actually did with this one is I cropped it into a vertical photo, and I just focused in on the eye, the arm, and you can kind of just see this evokes a totally different feeling just by making that composition more interesting and just choosing to focus on a detail when that works better than just kind of being like a weird in-between shot that's not really anything. So just keep in mind your composition. And with the bird photos, I found it's like get the whole bird in or zoom in and focus on details. All right, so now that we've talked about my tips for actually taking the photo, my fifth and final tip is all about editing wildlife photos. Now, there is so much that you can do in the edit of these photos, but there's a couple main things that I think will really help you make great edits. So let's go on over to my photo here of Roseanne the owl. I love her and her like big eyes. They are so cute. Now, the thing with wildlife photography is things that are really interesting about animals are their fur, in this case their feathers, and really showcasing that. You want it to be so sharp that it feels like someone could reach out and almost touch the photo. And then of course their eyes are always so adorable. We love animal eyes and how like gorgeous and cute they are. So you really want to showcase those as well. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is, now I've already done my basic edits on this photo. You can see there is the before, there's the after. I just did work with color, brightening it. The main thing that I did here is that I added more interest into the sky. And you can just basically usually create a blue sky by just going to luminance and bringing it down on blue. And that really will inject that blue color back into the skies. This is also why you should lean on underexposing your photo. If we look at the before, you can see it's underexposed on the bird, but that gives us a great base for the sky. So if I'd overexpose the sky, I wouldn't necessarily be able to add that much blue back into it so easily. So that's why, again, keep your photos a bit underexposed, and then you can just bring down the luminance on the blue, and now you have a great blue sky. Other than that, I added some saturation on the orange colors, brought up, shadows and things like that to get to this point. Now, once you have your basic edits done, that is when you can do the things that really are going to level up your photo. So like I said, the feathers are one of the most interesting things about this photo. So we're going to grab an adjustment brush, and I've talked about the adjustment brush so many times in videos. Click the link up there if you want to watch one all about it and how to use it. But go ahead and grab that. You can double click effect to reset your brush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the exposure, the shadows a little bit, and then I love this new texture tool in Lightroom. I've also done a video on the texture tool. It's like I've done a video about everything in Lightroom. So there is the link for that. But the texture tool is great for using on animals because it adds some contrast, but it's a bit smarter about it than the clarity tool. So I really highly suggest using that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just brush that all over the feathers here. And now that I put it on, I think I might have gone a bit too high with the exposure, so I'll just bring that back down and maybe bring the whites and the blacks down just to kind of create some contrast there. So that looks really nice. So once you kind of deal with that, then you want to go and focus on the eyes, because like I said, that is so important in these types of photos, especially in this one where the owl is literally looking right at the camera. So we'll go and grab another adjustment brush, double click effect. Now, the first thing I'm gonna do is that the eyes are so dark and I really wanna enhance that. So I'm gonna bring up the shadows and the exposure of all the little feathers all around the eyes. And by making this brighter and whiter, it's gonna even make the eyes, the darkness of the eyes, pop out even more. So we'll just increase that there. That's looking really good. And now my final tip is that we're gonna zoom right into the eyes and we're gonna really make them pop. And the easiest way to do that is just to go grab another adjustment brush, bring up the exposure, bring up the highlights, the whites. And then what I like to do is I just highlight all the spots where the light is already reflecting. So all these little bits in the eyes. And then I might even take it a step further and actually highlight these bits too. It's like it has a little eyeliner on, it's so cute. So that's just another thing. So anything you can do to really enhance the eyes and kind of show them off, do it. It looks so good. So this is my basic edit, and then using that adjustment brush, focusing on the eyes and the feathers, turns it into this, which I think really makes this photo. So those are my top 5 tips for wildlife photography. And I have to say, I had so much fun learning and trying something new. So I want to say a big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And also thank you for encouraging and supporting learning. Now, Skillshare is an online membership community with thousands of classes in business, photography, videography, anything you could want to learn, they have a class on it. And I really believe that they are the best place to learn new things because A, it costs less than $10 a month, so hey, that's awesome. And B, you can learn on your own terms whenever it works best for you. But not only that, they have some of the best teachers on Skillshare. Some of the best photographers are on there teaching amazing courses. Now, for the bird workshop that I got to go to, I was lucky enough, it was happening in my area and it was by someone who I really, really like. But I have so many amazing photographers that I look up to that I really don't have the opportunity to meet in person or go to their workshop in person. It's just not gonna happen and it would cost a lot of money. But on Skillshare, you can learn from some of the best people for such an affordable price. So my favorite course right now is a course taught by Chris Burkard, who is one of my favorite adventure photographers. So his course is all about outdoor photography, shooting in sunrise, sunset, all these things, and it's just so amazing to kind of see his process and how he takes photos and sort of how he thinks about taking photos. But he is, Insta famous and just an amazing photographer even beyond that. So it's someone who, to get the opportunity to learn from, is just amazing, and the fact that I can learn from him for less than $10 a month is the icing on the cake. So if you guys want to check out Skillshare, you can get 2 free months if you click that link in the description below. Do it. It's 2 free months. I don't know why you wouldn't do it. Click the link and sign up and try it out. Check out Chris's course and you will love it. All right, guys, awesome to see you again this week, and I'll talk to you next week. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that. Hit the bell, actually. That's what I'm told is the thing to do. Hit the bell. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week. Peace out.